Good morning and welcome to the Burning Platform, which is brought to you by Nando's every Thursday morning. It's our chance to catch up normally on current affairs, things that are in the news. We discuss some of the big issues that are going around in South Africa and internationally. We talk a little bit about politics, about the economy, about society. This morning, and because of this month being election month, or the lead up to the elections, the 1st of November, make sure you put that in your diary, we decided that we'd give a bunch of the political parties and the political leaders in this country a chance to speak for themselves. I've mentioned before that I've been hit by a brick wall when I've approached two of the parties. We've certainly had great responses from all of them. We've had members of COPE, we've had members of the IFP, we've had members of the Vryheidsfront Plus, we've had members of the DA, we've had members of Mudzuli Rakhivhane's party. Well, it's the company he's started, the One South Africa movement. We've had people from various places, including Patricia de Lille's Good Party. The two parties that just seem unwilling or unable to acquit themselves admirably in representing their own agendas and what they have on offer for people are the ANC and the EFF. And I'm still trying, but and I will keep trying until the day before the elections. But it seems to me that they don't really have much to talk about and are not keen to be seen. When they are seen, things like this happen.
You have the last election, you took the president to Alexander and he promised people 1 million houses.
It was never 1 million.
Sisazowakha izindlu ezilingana no-1 million.
What, it was what, 1,000?
No, it was never even 1,000.
What was
The
it?
1 million houses was in the figmentation of those who propagated.
How many did he promise?
1 million yezindlu zizowakhiwa lezo zindlu lapha Alexander Mamelane.
It was not 1 million. It was almost 100,000 houses that we wanted.
How many of those have you built since he made that promise in 2019 before the last election?
2019 was just 2 years ago.
Yeah, so?
Yes.
You need more than 2 years to build a house.
No, we are building every day. As we
In
speak,
Alexander?
As we speak now, we are building
No, in
houses.
Alex.
We are building houses.
But in Alex?
Even in Alex, we are building houses.
No, there's not a single house that was built in Alex after that promise he made.
Yeah. So there's JJ Tabane grilling Fikile Mbalula, who's the ANC's head of elections at the moment, on why they haven't built all those houses that Cyril clearly promised in the speech they also showed. Said he'd build 1 million houses in Alex, not one. So that's maybe why the ANC are not so keen to come and join us. Either way, we're going to give the other parties a little bit of room to explain themselves to us, and perhaps we should be ignoring the ones that don't want to engage with us. First this morning, I'd like to welcome from the One South Africa movement, which is founded by Mudzuli Rakhivhane, formerly of the DA, a non-profit company which focuses on activism and advocacy in the areas of education, entrepreneurship, and electoral reform. They're currently involved in supporting independent candidates with community organizations as part of their broader goals of electoral reform in South Africa. I'm very pleased to have Mudzuli Rakhivhane with us this morning. Mudzuli, nice to see you. How are you?
Well, thanks. How are you doing?
Good. We'll talk about what you and your people are trying to achieve in this election. I'm excited to hear what your contribution is likely to be. And also the leader of the opposition, a man who's at the head of the DA, the federal leader, John Steenhuisen. John, how are you?
Good morning to you, Gareth, and good morning to your guest.
Very good. It's good to have you both on. I'm also not going to go over old territory because Musi isn't here, first of all. And I know that John and Musi have lots of water under the bridge. There's no need for us to go backwards in terms of that conversation. And Mudzuli, it's not something you're particularly interested in, I'm sure, this morning either, right?
Okay. Not at all.
Very good. All right, good. That's a relief. So, John, I'm just going to give Mudzuli a chance first to explain, because I think we know more or less. The DA's got a track record. You guys have been around a long time. I don't know much about the One South Africa movement. How does it actually work, Mudzuli, when you guys are supporting independent candidates and, you know, we see that you're putting some push, some funding, perhaps some support behind these people, you're helping them to campaign. How do you choose which independent candidates you want to support and which ones you don't? Because there are obviously some who are dodgy and some who you think are pretty good candidates.
Yes. Okay, so we support over about 250 candidates across the country, and we had quite a strict criteria in picking them. We looked for candidates who fundamentally would sign what we called a pact. And this wasn't based on any sort of political ideology, but it was fundamentally about values. What are the values that you hold and you commit to seeing through in your tenure in office? We also looked for people who are already doing work in their communities. So fundamentally, these are people who are known by their communities. They've been working in their communities. They were actually elected by their own communities in order to be able to stand as independent candidates already. So fundamentally, they should already have support from the various communities that they represent. And then we also looked at the political landscape in the various municipalities to say, are you a municipality that's perhaps hung? What are the key issues that your municipality is facing? And do you have the competencies and the skills and the education, quite frankly, to be able to solve those problems? We stayed away from people who were looking to jump ship from, political parties without, any key sort of activism or advocacy behind them. So we're not a boat on which we're taking disgruntled, career politicians that purely want this platform just to be able to do what they were doing before. Our focus really is on activism, advocacy. Are you doing the work? Values, and then we support you.
All right. So values is an interesting area for us to start this discussion. And John, you've been very vocal about the fact that the DA will not be forming coalitions with parties that don't share their values. I think a big step away from the DA of yesteryear, where pretty much anyone you needed to ally yourselves with in order to get the requisite number of votes or support, you would have done. How's that changed in the DA, and how's it been received by the party and the electorate at large?
Well, Gareth, thanks very much. And obviously, we've learned a lot of lessons over the last 5 years. And what became very clear to us is that it is not possible to be in a coalition or a stable coalition with people that don't share your core values and principles. So we've got 4 key values and principles around which we will discuss with parties that share those values and principles the potential of being able to form coalitions. These are non-racialism, respect for the rule of law and the Constitution, a social market economy that sees business as a partner in growth and not as an enemy, and the building of a capable state or capable administration. In other words, an administration where you don't have cadre deployment, people are appointed on merit and ability to do the job, not on who they know. If you agree on those 4 key values and principles, we're willing to sit around the table and talk to you. It's been very clear to us over the last 4 years that the EFF do not share those values. And we got our fingers very badly burnt in Johannesburg. We ended up with a Manchurian candidate for a mayor there who essentially was being controlled by the EFF. And then Julius Malema was on SABC just this last fortnight, where he said very clearly that they were actually the people pulling the strings behind the scenes. And we ended up getting involved in things that were not core to our values and principles, and it ended up costing us. So I thought it was very important to unequivocally state this election that we won't be forming a coalition with the EFF.
Herman Mashaba seems on a mad tear at the moment to be blaming the DA for all his woes, and I'm concerned that this is a sideshow from the real fight, which isn't between you and Herman Mashaba or between you and your former leader Mmusi Maimane. As much as those things may have been embarrassing to the DA and might not have been handled in the best possible way, who knows? Hindsight is 20/20 vision. I think it's fair for you to be able to comment on the fact that the real elephant in the room is the ANC. And the ANC are the party that most people in this country are dissatisfied with across the spectrum, even ANC supporters. Likely, everybody's doing the polls at the moment, trying to get a handle on what might happen on election day. And by and large, it seems all the people in the know and all the people who are out there scouting opinions and trying to figure out what's going on at exit polls and early voting and all the rest of it, they're saying ANC supporters are just not going to pitch up in the numbers that they have before. This is going to be a very low turnout for the ANC. How do you feel about all of that? I mean, how do you feel about the fact that these former members of your party are really talking about you guys a lot? Maybe the thing we should be talking about is the ANC and perhaps what the other parties bring to the election.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's the frustrating point for me, is that, a lot of people want to be in opposition to the opposition. And, we want to be in opposition to the ANC. Nothing's going to change in South Africa unless we bring the ANC below 50%. We're going to stay on this terrible trajectory. So that is our main focus. And that's why you'll see posters going up around the country saying DA or ANC, that's your choice. Because on the 2nd of November, you're going to wake up in either a DA-led municipality, whether it's a coalition or other, or you're going to wake up in an ANC-run municipality, whether it's a coalition or not. Those are the two dominant parties. The smaller parties and independent candidates are going to have to coalesce around one of those polls. And so for us, the choice is very, very clear. You're going to either vote for a party that gets things done, and there's a track record of doing so, or you're going to end up with another 5 years of the ANC. And it is a pity that these parties want to be in opposition to the opposition, because it actually takes resources away from the front that we should all be uniting on to take votes off the ANC. And I can see my colleague shaking her head, but I would use the example of Mark Willemse, who her leader spent most of his tenure as leader trying to kick out of the DA for his party hopping and unprincipled behavior, and who's now banged back in Knysna municipality to be the mayor. He's exactly a party hopper that she said that the organization was straying away from. He's someone who took the DA's mayoralty and took it away from the DA, and eventually then ended up handing the town over to an ANC-led coalition. So, people must be wary that independents are not always independent, and that they often work in the favor of the ANC rather than assisting the opposition cause.
So, Mudzuli, there is this argument that people say, well, you waste your vote on a smaller party. Rather throw it behind the ANC or the DA. If you haven't made your mind up, that's the sensible thing to do. Why do you believe that independents are an important part of the mix? And in particular, why these smaller parties play a pivotal role, if that is your opinion?
Yes, that's definitely my opinion. And I think I'd like to go back and address the sort of narrative of it's the DA or the ANC. South Africa fundamentally is a multi-party democracy. So the notion that it's only one or the other is actually sort of fundamentally flawed to the principles of our democracy. And secondly, the DA does not have a God-given right to be the official opposition of this country. People are entitled to vote for people. People are entitled to vote for who they feel represents them. If I'm in KZN and I don't feel well represented by the DA, then I shouldn't have to vote for you. I should be able to vote for a quote-unquote smaller party, which is what faceted democracies are built around. So I think we need to divorce ourselves of the notion of it's either one or the other, and even investigate this title of the official opposition. Official to who? Even going back to the point of the DA,
constitutional amendment then.
We can certainly have a very good discussion about electoral reform and
Guys,
why that's so important.
Just from the electorate, and I'm only one voter, but sure. We don't care about the labels, and we don't care about what a multi-party democracy means to you guys. It's what it means to us. The reason we call John and his party the official opposition, because they've got the second biggest number of votes in Parliament. That's all. I don't really. Sure. It doesn't entail any glory or any particular power. Not in my book. And I think for most people, they just look at it as, okay, these guys are first, these guys are second, these guys are third. I'm asking you, Mudzuli, why should we worry about the person who's 12th or 16th on that list?
Because if that person represents what you stand for, if that person's doing the work, if that person is someone you fundamentally align with values, then that's the person who you should give your vote to. It doesn't make sense for me to give my vote to a party who's second because they're second, but they don't represent my interests. I don't align in their values. They don't align with my values.
All right. So
it's simple representative democracy. That's what it is.
Sure. And let's not all get sarcastic with each other so early into this conversation. But Mudzuli, what are those values in your book? John just told us there are 4 things fundamentally that he will not compromise on, and he thinks the DA should stand for. What do you guys believe your most important values are?
as One South Africa and what we are. Okay, sure. So one of them is definitely Ubuntu. So the value of Ubuntu, that a society needs to be able to work together and that we all are because each other are. Non-racialism, non-sexism, which is fundamentally so important in this country, given where we are with gender-based violence and inequality of women and children in this country. And then I think those would be sort of the top three ones. And then obviously, fundamental core values.
That's good. And John, is it hard in leadership? And Mudzuli, you can probably comment on this too. Is it hard to make sure that everybody actually does believe in those values? Because you don't know. A lot of people will say, and politicians, I hate saying this because I'm actually sitting talking to two politicians now, but you've got a terrible reputation as being venal, being willing to go any way the wind blows, being able to say just what you think people want to hear. How do you actually determine the values of your members, and how do you figure out whether or not they're being honest about that?
Well, I think you judge people by their behavior. I mean, no organization can insulate itself, whether it's a service club, a church, a business, from people who join it and who then don't share the values and principles. But if you're able to determine that, you've got to deal with those people. And I think we have a track record of dealing with people who do not share our values and principles, which is precisely why we moved against Mr. Willemse in Knysna, and why there was disciplinary action in that particular regard. So you've got to make sure that those core values and principles are maintained, and you've got to take action even when there's a lot of pain. So if people are corrupt or they're involved in things that don't align with your values, you've got to remove them from your organization, and it comes at a cost. I mean, we went through a big one with the DeLille matter, with the mayor of George, people who did not share our values and principles, and we had to take action against them. But I think it is worth it, and I think that voters can take comfort in the fact that we're prepared to do so. Because if you don't, you end up exactly where the ANC find themselves now, where everybody in the party knows everybody else is small and yana skeletons, and you can't then act against anybody, because if I act against you, well, you're going to spill the beans that I was involved in this tender. And then you end up with a moribund organization that cannot move and cannot stand for anything. So politics, in politics, you've got to be a signpost, not a weather vane that blows in the wind. You've got to be a signpost that points people in a direction, no matter which way the wind is blowing.
One thing I'm sure both of you will have no real truck with is the fact that we're living at a very precarious stage in South Africa's development and in the history of this country. We've got to a point now where, after several years of democracy and several years of freedom for the majority of the people of this country, we don't have a lot to show for it. And we've seen, at least in the last 10 years, some substantial decline in the size of the economy, in the job prospects of individuals, in the education system, in the service delivery of municipalities. This is a local and municipal election. These are the most interesting ones, even though they don't get the kind of coverage and attention and attraction that the national elections get. John, are you standing in your own ward in this particular election? And Mudzuli, can you tell us about where you guys are focused? Because those issues are the things that most people are interested in here. And they're not glamorous. They're not exciting. It's things like burst pipes. It's rubbish collection. It's street lights that have been blown out. It's potholes in the roads. This is not a glorious thing. This is not politicians looking for the big salary jobs in the executive and the union buildings. This is ordinary stuff.
Yeah, so Gareth, I mean, I'm not standing in a ward. I was a councillor for 10 years in eThekwini, so I've actually been in the arena. I've sat in a council, and I know how important it is to have a team with you, because politics is a numbers game, whether we like it or not. And as long as the system is designed the way it is now, you need the numbers in council to get things done. Otherwise, you're a lone voice that sits at the back of the hall. You get to speak for 2 minutes, maybe once every second council meeting. You have to take a rota on motions and questions to the municipality. And it's very difficult to represent anybody's interests if you're a lone voice sitting at the back of a hall. It's just the way the system is designed. It's unfortunately a numbers game. Would we like to reform the system? Absolutely, which is why the DA has been driving electoral reform in the National Assembly. But politics, the reality is, it is a numbers game. And you're right, it goes to the basics of getting things done. It's about service delivery. And that's why you'll notice the governing party is trying to make this election about anything other than service delivery. They're trying to make it about race. They're trying to make it about ethnicity. They're trying to make it around anything, any other matter they can latch onto, because they've got such an appalling track record in delivery. They don't have a good story to tell in any municipality that they run around the country.
As I said at the beginning of this, I'm struggling even to get someone from the ANC, which is why, again, I appreciate both of you being here, to even talk to us, because they've got nothing to talk about. And everything that I'm going to bring up is going to embarrass them.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly right. And Puli Mabi was asked on TV the other night, can you point to one municipality that is a success? And he said Ekurhuleni. Ekurhuleni is a disaster.
No.
It's sitting for days. Trash is not collected. Pipes are broken. It is a complete disaster. So that's the best you can come. I can understand why they're trying to make this about anything other than service delivery.
I want to give Mudzuli a chance to just talk about electoral reform. It's a big part of what you guys are doing in the One South Africa movement. What kind of electoral reform are you looking at? I know independent candidates, and by the way, Mudzuli, I'm a big fan of independent candidates. I would like a Karen in my neighborhood to be standing, because those kind of people get things done. They really are. I mean, the Karens who we saw, doing things during lockdown, helping supply food to old age homes, going out and repairing potholes themselves. These are the kind of people. Harry Smith's a great example of where people stood up and were counted and did the right thing without having the politicians necessarily involved. Independent candidates are an important and vibrant part of any system. Do we have enough of a culture for that, though? And John, if you can just hold your breath for 10 seconds here, because I know that you guys have the political party infrastructure and the track record to be able to explain away independence. But I think that they're an important part of things, and I think Mudzuli will agree with me.
Yes, absolutely. And I think when I'm done, it would be interesting to hear from John what he means by, the DA supports electoral reform. And maybe we can get some comment on the bill that's currently sitting in Parliament, where absolutely nothing's been done. And it's been, we're heading into about 8 months until that deadline is up. So just for the benefit of your listeners, Gareth, about a year and a half ago, the Constitutional Court had formally put a judgment down to say that the fact that independent candidates cannot run at provincial and national level is actually unconstitutional. So they've given Parliament 2 years to amend the electoral bill or the Electoral Act, rather, to reflect that independent candidates should be able to run at those two levels. Now, we have word on the street that the ANC's plan is basically just to sort of take the bill and put a comma at the end and say independent candidates, which is so disappointing because it actually doesn't give any substantive form to the judgment and give independent candidates substantive power. And so the work we're doing now, when you ask the question about culture, is to say we actually need to use this local election to gain that momentum and to build that culture. And I can tell you that the independent candidates, the numbers from the IEC is that it's been doubled and then some in terms of how many independent candidates are actually running in this election. So was there a culture? A small one. Is it massively improving? Yes. And this is all in a ramp up to the next election and elections to come, to say electoral reform is fundamentally key to how we're going to develop our democracy. I'd love to hear what the DA has been doing about electoral reform and the bill that's been sitting in Parliament for the last 18 or so months with nothing really substantive going on.
Well, you didn't tell me though what you guys want to do before I hand over to John. What you'd like to see. So independent candidates, as you say, part of it
is but one part. Yes.
Sure, there's broad agreement on that, but what are the other things that you'd like to see happen?
So we have a very extensive bill that's sitting in Parliament, and some of the issues that it covers is how many representatives we actually have in this country. I mean, we have a massive Parliament and MPs that just go on for days. And what are they actually doing, and the resources that it actually takes from this country. So it deals with that. It deals with gender representation, to say this is how we want to see genders represented, at least at a minimum threshold at national level. It deals with how we break up, how we even vote. So it deals with electronic voting, to say, how are we going to develop our system? I mean, I'm sure everyone has had this experience. The IEC's current systems are actually so nightmarish and backdated that how many people were excluded from even registering to vote because their online system was just so terrible. So electoral reform is actually all-encompassing. Independent candidates is just but one part. Another part is, which is also extensively covered in the bill, is constituencies. How do we actually break South Africa into constituency so that you actually know who your representative is in Parliament. I think if you did a survey with most South Africans, they can't tell you 5 parliamentarians because they don't know them, because they didn't vote for them, because there's absolutely no connection between your representative and you.
What's horrifying, and I think both of you are going to agree on this too, is that many of the candidates in these wards will only be decided afterwards. The parties, particularly the ANC, are so convinced that they're going to win that they'll just put someone in eventually. It doesn't matter who you're voting for.
Yeah. And I think that's an important point you make, because that's also an important part of electoral reform, especially at national level. This thing of closed party lists is actually one of the biggest impediments that we have in this country. Why do I not know that if we get X amount of votes, that these are the 20, 30, 40 people that are going to represent me? We have to move to a place where at least we have an open party list so that I can pre-decide that actually I'm not keen for this person. I'm not going to put my vote towards this party.
All right, John, you were shaking your head quite vigorously.
Yeah. Well, two things. There's a fundamental misunderstanding of politics. The lists are published on the IEC website long before election day. So those lists exist. Now, I'm not defending the current system, but I mean, we must be honest and upfront about facts, because facts do matter. Every party is required to publish their list on the IEC website. You can go and have a look. You can go have a look anytime you want.
If those are the rules of the game, then you've got to make sure you fulfill the game's rules in order to have victory conditions established. Okay, fine.
So the other point I just want to make about their bill, and it proves my point exactly, they've got a 2-member party that has sponsored their bill in Parliament, and it's going nowhere because that party doesn't have the heft in Parliament to be able to get it onto committee agendas, to be able to get it through the channels, and to be able to get those things done. That's why their bill is stalled and why it's sitting there. Maybe they should have come and spoken to the DA. We would have been happy to help them out. We tabled an electoral reform bill in the last Parliament, which would seek to take South Africa and divide it into our Parliament into half PR, half constituency based. Because what you don't want to do is move to a full constituency system, because then precisely the minority voices that OneSA say they're wanting to make sure are heard in Parliament would be completely decimated by two big parties. You'd end up with 2 parties sitting in Parliament if it was a complete constituency system. So we proposed a mixed system, much like you have at local government. In terms of the ward candidates, you will know who your ward candidate is. You will be voting for your ward candidate. That cannot change unless that person resigns after election day, in which case it'd be a by-election. It is the PR list system, I think, at the local government level that I think that the other guest was referring to, and not to, so everybody will know who their ward candidate is. I mean, I know I was a ward candidate for 10 years. Everybody had my number. I served my constituents, and that's as it should be in politics. And I think that
I'm pleased that you brought that up, John, because it's also our responsibility as voters to hold you guys accountable. You need to have your ward councillor's number on your phone, and you need to know who's in charge of your municipality. And, Mudzuli said it just now too. A lot of people don't know who that's on us. That's not on you guys, as much as you're out there trying to get our votes and get our attention. And that's a hard job. I think campaigning is probably tougher than it's ever been. And social media doesn't necessarily help because people get completely caught up in nonsense. Now, it would be remiss of me to not give John a chance to talk about the track record and also to tell us what you're planning to do. We've spoken to some of your candidates in some of your municipalities who are running. I think we spoke to your Joburg mayoral candidate not so long ago, Mpho, and we've heard some of that stuff. Where are you looking to have the biggest victories, and what does your track record tell us about what the DA might be able to do?
Well, Gareth, for the first election in the DA's history, we're contesting wards in every single ward in South Africa. We've got a candidate in every ward. So we're going to try and bring the ANC under 50% in every single municipality around the country, because that is the pathway we believe that is going to force change and break this deadlock of poor service delivery and terrible conditions that many of these municipalities find themselves in. So what is the track record? Well, it's contained in our manifesto, which sets out the 7 key things that you've got to get right in any municipality, whether it's a small local municipality or metro, from water infrastructure, electricity infrastructure, safety and security, local economic development, ensuring that you can make cities resilient from the failures of national government. And what's great about the manifesto, and it's available on our website, www.da.org.za, is it uses examples of where we govern already the things that we're doing. So whether it's the fact that we keep people one load shedding level lower than the rest of the country in Cape Town because we generate our own electricity, and we're going to be doing a lot more in that space over the next 5 years, or the plastic road in the Coca municipality, the incredible social housing units that I visited in Tshwane 2 days ago. These are all things that we are doing already. So our manifesto is not pie in the sky promises, because it's very easy for anybody to come and say, well, I'll give you this, I'll write that off, I'll build this, I'll do the next thing, and promise you the sun, moon, and the stars. It's got to be practically achievable. And I think that's the big thing about the DA manifesto. It's a record of action and a promise of more. And whether it's Ratings Africa, whether it's the Auditor General, whether it's the Citizen Satisfaction Survey, or News 24's latest thing that came out, DA municipalities are the top-run municipalities in the country. And that's because of our track record of good, clean, accountable governments and delivering services. Where the DA governs, we get things done. And that is an incontrovertible truth. And why the ANC don't want to challenge us on that, why are they trying to find issues of race and every other excuse not to talk about the one fundamental question of service delivery.
I do want to go to one of these issues of race, because it was pretty much a non-event to me and probably to the people of that neighborhood as well. But these posters in Phoenix became the biggest story in South Africa for 3 weeks. What with the benefit now of hindsight and some water having gone under the bridge, what do you think went on there, and what do you think that really was about? And do you feel as the DA that you guys score some own goals sometimes unnecessarily, or do you feel this was a mountain made out of a molehill?
I think it was a mountain made out of a molehill. I will accept that perhaps there was no foregrounding of the message. But let me be very clear, and I've been very clear right from the beginning, that when government retreated during those July riots, whether it was in Joburg or in KwaZulu-Natal, it was ordinary citizens that stepped up and stepped in to protect their neighborhoods, to ensure that people's businesses were protected, to ensure their families were protected. And those people are heroes. And I don't care what anybody says, those people are heroes. Whether it's the people who are stepping in and doing the water in Costa, or whether it's those people in Phoenix who stood up. Vigilantism, absolutely. We never once said that we supported people who broke the law. We said anybody who stood up for the rule of law was a hero in that time. And I maintain that. And I will never stop apologizing that anybody is an active citizen who steps up and in a lawful manner, and when the confines of the law fills a gap where government has retreated, is a hero, and they should be treated as such. So I think that probably there could have been some foregrounding on that. But I would say that the message, the fundamental message.
I have a question on that. Two things. One, I find it interesting that you previously said, the ANC is trying to make this whole thing about race and service delivery. Maybe you can explain how a post that was directly targeted at race was a poster that was supposed to encourage service delivery. So that is a bit confusing to me. It seems like you were playing a bait race game over there, which had nothing to do with quote unquote proven track record of the DA and service delivery. So I don't think that quite aligns with the strategy that you're talking about that says everything we've been discussing is on track record, is about track record. And then the second thing I'm going to say is I personally, I take affront to that. And I think what you fundamentally misunderstand is that the race tensions between the Black and Indian community in KZN is not something that began in Phoenix. This is something that has stretched literally decades, and it's something that was so critically pioneered by the apartheid government to make sure that people, especially between Black and Indian people, that they gave Indian people just that little bit of extra privilege so that it creates a mindset that, I am better than this race that has been classed below me. So to not understand the historical context and then to put something like that up there is actually so inciting when it comes to racial tension. I don't think that was well thought out at all.
John, answer the two questions from Mudzuli, and then we can hopefully get on.
First of all, it's got everything to do with service delivery. Where you have a metro police service like you have in the city of Cape Town, with 1,100 extra police officers on the street to maintain law and order, you're able to step in and step up. And maybe if that had happened in Durban and the metro police hadn't retreated into the shadows, we would have had not had communities having to look after themselves in that time of the ANC's internal battle. I do find it odd to be lectured by OneSA about race and race issues, and I suggest that maybe the honourable member goes back and trolls her leaders' comments around Ashton Willemse, Schweizer Rennick, and others before she comes to talk about people driving race divisions. Let me tell you, I was the constituency head of the Phoenix constituency in Durban for 5 years. There have not been race problems between Indian and black people in Bambai, Inanda, and Phoenix. They've lived very well together. They've worked together. It is a really integrated community. What we saw there was people driving a race narrative, politicians coming in carrying placards saying all Indians are bloodthirsty killers. We had Bheki Cele scapegoating minorities, trying to cover up his fake ability to be able to do anything around policing. So I would simply say that I think it's naive if OneSA are now saying that, well, what the people of Phoenix did by stepping up and protecting their communities and by ensuring that businesses weren't damaged and the rule of law was upheld in their communities, they are somehow now in race inciters. I don't think that's true at all. I think that anyone who stands up for the rule of law in South Africa, who stands up on the side of right, should be protected and defended by all of us, especially organizations that are trying to say that they want people's, particularly minority voices, to be heard as well in various forums.
Well, let's see how it shakes out in the elections. I'm fairly sure that politicians are adept at exploiting all kinds of differences that we have between each other. But in this case, the good people are the ones who didn't break the law, and the bad ones are the ones who did break the law. And if you think that all the good ones happen to be black or Indian or white, then I think you're missing the point, because there were good people of all races on the one side and bad people of all races on the other. I think that's fairly. Look,
well, if that was the case, I don't think you would have had the reaction in Phoenix. I think we are trying to make this seem like it was the whole nation. The rest of the nation was an uproar, but the people in Phoenix were fine.
I don't want to
I'm not sure about that context.
I don't want to do what every other media organization in this country has done and tried to create some false equivalence between a DA poster and the absolute abhorrent theft of billions of rands from the coffers of this country, which has really affected the poor and exacerbated differences between us, and say that the DA is as equally awful as the ANC in this case.
It's not about equality. It's not about an equality of issues. Those issues affect people. I'm not sure. Maybe it's just my experience.
I'll tell you what. I'm sure that there are 100,000 people who are going to sleep tonight worrying about where their next meal's coming from, and about 5 people who are worried about the hideous racism that's out there.
Oh, anyway, I think that's I'm sorry, I must interject at that point.
Let's see if it gets tested. I don't think that many people are interested. In fact, the IRR has shown us endless reports of people who say that racism is at the bottom of their list of priorities and concerns. Their biggest priority.
You obviously don't experience the kind of racism that I experience on a daily basis. So to say that's something that no one cares about, I'm sorry.
No,
that's really,
your personal
that's really
experience. Your personal experiences are completely anecdotal and unimportant to all of us. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate the fact that you think that the experience of a black woman in this country is unimportant and irrelevant.
I'm not interested, Mudzuli, I'm not interested in identity politics at all. Nobody really is. They're only interested in themselves, what they can get out of this. The elections are coming up.
Service delivery.
Please, it's just, I'm over it. It's so uninteresting. And this has played out so badly for people in other parts of the world where they've tried it. I can't believe you're going down this track.
No, Gareth, we're not speaking about identity politics. We were literally speaking. Okay, you can proceed with your conversation then. Please proceed.
No, I want you to finish. I want you to at least explain.
You don't want me to finish because you're speaking over me. I'm just trying to, this was not about sucking us into a conversation about race politics and identity politics. We were having a conversation to say that the issues of service delivery are not as important as the issues that people genuinely feel when they feel like they're being race-baited. And what I'm saying to you is don't
in a municipal election, they just aren't.
Okay, but municipal elections don't stop the rest of your experience. And racism is structural as well. So it's not like it's, because it's municipal election, everything else that I'm...
Is the ward councillor of your ward going to solve the problems you have with racism? I mean, in all honesty, climate change. I mean, let's talk about gender politics because it's a municipal election. No, I want the water and electricity and the roads to work.
And what I'm asking is for the DA then not to bait on the race issues. Had they not put that poster up,
we're not baiting on the race issues. Sorry, I want to come in here. How's it baiting on the race issue? When you put up a poster that says people that stood up for the rule of law are heroes. How's that race baiting? The people
That's
who
not
stood
what
up
the
in
post
Phoenix
said.
were black, white, Indian, and colored South Africans. How is it race baiting to say that people who stood up for the rule of law were racists? How is it race baiting to say that those people were heroes, regardless of color? We didn't put up a post and said all Indian people are heroes. No, but
Okay.
you are
Let me
taking
ask
the
you this. So
mainstream
why did you
media's
take it down?
narrative.
Why did you
No,
take
I
it
want to
down?
finish.
Why did
I
you
would
take
like
it
to
down?
finish.
Okay, sure. Then you can answer why you took it down.
Okay, so that we didn't say Indians are heroes. We said they called you racists. We called you heroes. It was to talk about everybody, black, white, Indian, and colored there, who were able to stand up and not retreat in the face of lawlessness and looting that was allowed by a failed state to occur because it could not do its primary responsibility. One of the reasons why societies and the state were formed in the first place, to protect its citizens from danger. We took it down because it was distracting the media outrage and the faux rage of people like yourself. That in fact then distracted from the message that we wanted to have around service delivery. That was why the poster came from.
Fair enough. But then why did you take them down and apologize? I mean, you should have just stuck to your guns.
Well, I've stuck to my guns from the beginning about this thing. I've been very, very clear. And as I said on your show, I'm unapologetic.
Why did they take them down?
Those people down because it was the faux rage from the mainstream media and sort of the political commentators and the critical race theorists was so distracting from our core message of service delivery that we just got it out of the way so we could focus on service delivery.
But you can see it hasn't gone out of the way. The problem is when you kowtow to these mobs, whoever they may be, whether you agree or disagree with them, it doesn't go away. It just gets worse. They see it as blood in the water, and you apologize once and you're forever their slave. It's pointless. Just do what you need to do. And if you apologize, you're making a huge mistake. So have the courage of your convictions there as well. I'm sorry.
I think one party that does that actually pretty well is the Freedom Front Plus. They say what they say and they 100% stick to their guns. And I can appreciate that. I know what I'm dealing with when I deal with the Freedom Front Plus. They have a clear view that apartheid was not a crime against humanity. Cool. And they'll stick by that. They will be badgered in the media. They will be badgered by the mob and faux liberals and whatever you want to call them. But that is fundamentally their party line and they stick to it. And I think as a voter, you can appreciate that as opposed to this flip-flop and I got pressure here, so I've actually changed my mind over here.
Okay,
I think we need to give a...
But I want to move...
Organization with the ultimate flip-flopper at the head of it.
Okay, sure. Fair enough. I knew you guys wouldn't get along, and that's absolutely fine. But what I want to move away from is the idea that we need to talk about big national and political issues in an election which is about the small things. And this is a distraction. I brought up the posters because I knew if I didn't bring them up, it would be something people would say, oh, you're giving John an easy ride. Okay. So I brought it up now. We've had a nice discussion about it. We've had a bit of an argument. That's great. Now we need to move back to the other things that matter in municipalities. You said you're contesting in every municipality, in every ward in the country, John, including the ones where you've got no hope at all. Why are you doing that? Why is that important as a statement?
Because people need to have an alternative. And as the second largest party and the official opposition as designated by the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, it's not some glamorous, as you say, designation we've self-styled ourselves as. The Constitution designates the second largest party as the official opposition, and it's in the chapter on Parliament, if you're looking there in your Constitution. That is a designated constitutional provision. We've got to provide an alternative to the ANC. That is what our mission is. And our mission is to bring the ANC below 50% in as many places as possible so that we can start to wrestle power away from them and then start to prepare the ground for bringing them below 50% at a national level. If we don't bring the ANC under 50%, nothing is going to change in South Africa. We're going to have the same old muddling along on a downward trajectory. Unemployment's going to increase. Our economy is going to tank even further. And we're going to end up in a failed state. The reality is that we've got to bring them below 50% because that's the only thing that's going to force a spring of change in South Africa.
So Mudzuli sounds like she would be voting for the Freedom Front
Freedom
Plus.
Front, yeah. OneSA endorses Freedom Front Plus. It's an headline.
We're best friends. That is aligned.
let's not misquote her, but the fact is, a lot of people who might be voting DA. Let's look at the people who are on the right of your constituency who might go, well, actually, the Vryheidsfront Plus might be a better option for me. Why would you say again that they shouldn't use their vote with the Freedom Front Plus when perhaps they voted for the DA for the last 3 elections and they don't want to do it anymore because, maybe things haven't happened quickly enough for them and they don't like what's going on?
I'll tell you why, Gareth, and it's a very simple answer. The ANC's dream...
Or maybe they didn't like Musi Maimane in the last election. Now they feel slighted. Who knows?
Yeah. So there's a very simple answer to that. And that is that the ANC's dream for South Africa is to divide South Africans into little camps of race, culture, class, ethnicity, and divide and rule. Because once you've got people in small little single issue camps, it's very easy to push them out of the path and do whatever you want and have your will with the country. The only roadblock that we're going to have to the ANC doing that is by bringing South Africans from all races, cultures, language, religions together around those common set of values and principles and forming a roadblock. So the great thing about the DA, and you would have noticed over the course of the last little while, is that I'm not an Afrikaans-speaking South African. I'm an English-speaking South African. But I've been standing up really hard for the onslaught, against the onslaught by national government of Afrikaans language rights in South Africa. And I, as an English person, can stand up in a big camp to protect the rights of and the language and culture rights of Afrikaans South Africans, isiZulu South Africans, isiXhosa South Africans. I think we're much stronger protecting our rights together as part of a big united front, rather than just these small little single issue ethnic parties that just get swept out of the way and pushed out of the way.
Mudzuli looks incredulous. What do you say to that?
Okay, so just for maybe some context in this discussion, I studied at Stellenbosch University, and I also worked at the Constitutional Court when they handed down the judgment about language rights, particularly Afrikaans minority rights when it comes to language and studies. So with that backdrop, I think we should all understand what the language policy real issue is. The national government cannot say to you that no university should ever teach in Afrikaans. The Constitution is actually very clear when it comes to higher education. The whole point is that when it comes to minority language, it's a progressive realization right. So I would think that we would have to first get a baseline sorted out, which means that more and more South Africans should have access to higher education. Once we've sorted out that baseline, what we can do is make a progressive realization towards incorporating minority languages such as Afrikaans, such as Xhosa, such as Zulu. So if you'd read the judgment, and particularly the one about Stellenbosch and AfriForum, it wasn't AfriForum, it was Galeka Kansa. Fundamentally, Stellenbosch cited the fact that they actually cannot afford to have Afrikaans at this level not cancelled. It is absolutely not cancelled in Stellenbosch University. If you walk into a campus today, you will find that on campus, it is English and Afrikaans used in different contexts at different percentages. So let's divorce ourselves of that. That is absolutely not the truth. And it is evident in their language policies. But the judgment fundamentally hangs on the fact that if a university cannot afford it, then they cannot be forced to cater for a minority language right when the constitutional provision is for the progressive realization of minority languages when it comes to that. So, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this. I'm not sure why the DA is particularly pushing this agenda at Stellenbosch when the Constitutional Court has already made a determination on this. So what do you believe you're going to achieve past what the Constitutional Court has already ruled on?
I suggest the guest goes and reads the UNISA judgment, which was handed down a few weeks ago. I think it's far more relevant in this particular case, where Afrikaans was reinstated as the language of instruction by the Constitutional Court.
Right.
It was the UNISA judgment. It's been very widely reported on in the media, where it made it very, very clear that there had to be a reinstatement there. But let me just say this to you, Gareth, that you can have all the policies and that you like. I was on the campus dealing with students who were instructed in their boarding houses that they were not allowed to speak Afrikaans, even in the bathrooms to each other, even around tables, even on benches in the parks. That was the instruction that was handed down, and that the students have come out. They've said very clearly, and it's exactly that sort of marginalization and micromanagement of situation. that I think that we should all be standing
John,
against.
did you study at that university? Because I did for 4 years.
I didn't study at the university, but I don't have to study at the university to go and speak to the constituents and students there who are having a problem. That's what politicians do, actually.
I just want to, no, I wasn't trying to bait you. I was just trying to say that we need to give perspectives. I studied there for 4 years. So what I'm giving you is a 4 years worth of practical experience.
Mudzuli, this is anecdotal. It's your personal experience. Again, this is just like in the I'm a black woman thing. It's not important to the average person out there who isn't you. No, I mean, it's like, this is, you can't bring your own experience in and expect that to be the deciding factor.
Let's go back to the constitutional provision.
You've worked in the constitutional court. You're a professional and highly erudite woman who's acquitted yourself extremely admirably this morning. I don't want you to get the impression that I'm completely disregarding things just because you're bringing in anecdotal evidence. What I want to talk about, and this is probably an unimportant and unpopular opinion, but I think our universities are just a disaster anyway. If I had kids right now, I wouldn't even send them to our universities. I think they're a complete mess. I think they're training people in things that we don't need. And we need to find people jobs in places where we can do things, not say things. We need less people, with all due respect, like you and John, and more people who can fix, who can build, who can grow, who can manufacture. That's how we'll get this country ahead. And universities are just absolutely ill-equipped to do that at the moment. So they, to me, are becoming increasingly irrelevant as we discuss things that matter in South Africa. Perhaps to wrap this up, I'm going to give Mudzuli first a chance to explain the One South Africa movement and what you guys offer. And I can't help thinking, like, here you are, you both, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And the enemy for both of you is the ANC, ultimately. I mean, the ANC are the ones who hold the majority of power in this country. And people who are voting in this election, whether they're voting for Musi or his independent candidates, or for you, John, and your various councillors across the country, they're thinking, as long as we can do something about the ANC, we'll be doing good. They don't really care about the internecine squabbles of these small parties and the DA. Do you feel, Mudzuli, you guys have a lot more to offer than the DA, but more especially, do you think you have a good argument against the ANC?
Okay, so part one of the question, do we have more to offer? I don't think it's about more or less. I think it's about something different. If everyone was satisfied with what the DA was offering, then they would have the votes to back that up. And more than that, instead of speaking about the people who are voting and trying to sort that out, there's a huge number, I think it's in the 10 million region, of people who aren't voting. And the question is why? And so One South Africa is actually geared towards how do we actually re-enfranchise those people who are even registered to vote. So what happened between you registering to vote and not voting, and then all those people who aren't actually registered to vote? So that is the key offering over here, to say I'm not really concerned about more or less. I'm concerned about what is something different, because the model that we've had since 1994 obviously isn't yielding the fruits that we're looking for as a country. So that's sort of part one. Part two, in terms of the ANC, this is the whole thing about electoral reform. In this current electoral reform system that we have in the current electoral system we have right now, it's extremely difficult. And so we need to actually gear more towards, and it's not solely about independence, but holistically, we really need to work towards independent electoral reform. And that will be, I think, one of the key things that will be almost the catalyst that will need to sort of defeat the beast. And I'll just say one thing just on the point that you raised before, Gareth. I don't mean to be heated or whatever the perception may be. I just feel like the reason why I use my own anecdotal example was because I was responding to the fact that John had used one to say he had gone onto campus and engaged with 4 people or 5 people. So if the rules are engagement that he can use an example, I feel like it's only fair that I can use an example. Okay. But fundamentally, we can always shift back to what's on paper, what's in the Constitution.
Your point is well made. And I especially like your point about how those people who are not voting at the moment, clearly, John, they're not thrilled with what you're offering either. So are you doing things to appeal to those people who are not voting as much as you are to those who are already fans? You've got a floor. You might not have a ceiling yet as the DA. You might be able to increase those numbers, but they're not going to come from existing DA voters, are they?
No, it's going to come through growth, Gareth, and it's how we've grown is using the model of excellent service delivery. So you may recall, for instance, in the city of Cape Town, we first got into government then an 8-party coalition. In the next election, people trusted us more and we got more votes there. We end up now with a 2/3 majority in the city of Cape Town because you build trust through excellent service delivery and making sure that people's needs are met. And that is why unemployment is the lowest in the Western Cape. Unemployment is lowest in DA-run municipalities, highest access to basic services. Good, clean, accountable government actually is the most pro-poor policy that you can adopt in South Africa. And it's by shifting people's minds, by delivering well and delivering for all, that you're able to ensure that more and more people are encouraged to come out and vote when they actually see that there's a causal link between the way they vote and the way in which they live. And that is how the DA grew in the Western Cape. It's how we intend to grow around the country, which is why it's imperative that we gain control in as many municipalities as possible, and we bring the ANC below 50%. My target is not OneSA independent candidates. My target is the ANC. But people need to think very, very strategically in this election because it does make a difference. Say, for instance, there's a ward where a DA councillor has a slim majority, and you have an independent or a smaller party that takes 3-4%. They're never going to win the ward. They take 3-4% and they let an EFF or ANC councillor in win the ward. That's one extra ANC seat on the council. And that's where the danger comes in. So people need to think very strategically when they vote. Who's got the best chance in that particular ward of unseating the ANC? And I think that's where our size and our reach comes in, and why the DA is making gains in these municipalities and the like. And the focus has got to be on service delivery. That's all this election is about. It's about
just one other thing, John, that I was slightly pissed off about the DA in the last 2 years, because I'm going to be anecdotal for a second here. Like I appreciate that you guys have a good track record, right? I appreciate that there's a lesser of two evils argument that also comes into it. But my biggest problem was you guys seem to have been in support of the lockdown from day one. And I know that there were very few outliers in the world who weren't in support of lockdowns. But the DA took so long to come around to the fact that this was a bad idea, that this was a statist move, that it was about control, that it was... You could have probably won a few more people over if you'd stood strongly against the ANC from day one in that respect. Do you want to just explain yourself?
Yeah, Gareth, I think that, and I will send you after the show, because I was made the Mampara of the Week for it. After the second lockdown was announced, obviously we supported the first one because nobody knew what was going on. We didn't see what the international experience had been and the like. So it made sense to lock down to prepare the healthcare facilities, etc. But it became very evident to us right from the get-go that this thing was going to squeeze the economy. And in fact, poverty is a far bigger killer in South Africa than coronavirus ever would be. And so you may recall I put out that press statement saying it's about lives and livelihoods, Mr. President. And the mainstream media dragged me for weeks on it. They pilloried the DA.
You know, you guys could both do well to pay less attention to the mainstream media and social media. In fact, honestly,
but what I'm saying to you, Gareth,
I know,
what I'm saying is that we came out hard for it against hard lockdowns. We put our money where our mouth is and instituted court action against the draconian regulations, particularly in the personal care industry. We assisted small businesses in litigation. We're the only party that's taken the Disaster Management Act on review to the court to take away government's powers to essentially keep us in this draconian form of government, which I imagine they've got no intention of letting go of. So that case is absolutely going to be important in the next month or two.
I know, and obviously, you know, we're going to have differences. I hope that those differences don't hand a victory to the ANC, and I hope either party here does as well. I'm behind you both. I love the idea of independent candidates, and I love what Musi's doing. He didn't just withdraw and go into business, which so many other people might have done. I know that the DA and Musi will always have their differences, and that's okay. I can respect both. I can like what both of you are doing. Mudzuli, it's a great pleasure to have you on the show for the first time. I don't think this will be the last time because you're on fire this morning. John, thank you for explaining the Phoenix posters for the umpteenth time. And go out there, both of you, and get some votes. Let's turn this country around because, my God, do we need to. Well done.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
Thank you,
Gareth. Thank
guys.
you, and great to be with both of you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Mudzuli. Thank you, John. Cheers.
Bye.